China's EUV breakthrough. Huawei SMIC reportedly advancing LDP lithography third quarter 2025 trial 2026 rollout. Okay, if this is true, this is absolutely astonishing. There's no other way to put this. So let's go ahead and let's just cover the basis of what this is. On this channel, I have talked often about the only thing that Huawei is missing. Right now, Huawei is unveiling its last few years of progress to the world. It's showing, we just found out about the factory that they're making, right, to produce their own chips. We have just seen the Cloud Matrix 384. We have heard about the new generation of Kirin chips. And we've also heard about the Ascend 910D coming out and how good it's supposed to be, right? But now the biggest thing is this. This is the only piece that's missing, and that is EUV. So it says here, China is advancing extreme ultraviolet lithography with a domestically developed system undergoing testing at Huawei's Dongguan facility, according to X-Fastest and WCC F-Tech. Trial production is reportedly set for the third quarter of 2025 with mass production targeted for 2026. I just want to keep in mind, we need to be skeptical on this, not because I doubt Huawei. Okay, what Huawei has been doing is absolutely incredible. But just because right now this is just a paper that came out, they have initial testing that's going on, there's a lot that could go wrong. But if they are able to achieve this, this is not an understatement, it's just game over. They will be the only person on earth to own the entire supply chain for chip making. They'll own the whole thing. Even like right now, again, Apple, NVIDIA, they don't produce their own chips. They go to TSMC, and TSMC doesn't produce the EUV. They go to ASML, and ASML doesn't produce the optics. They go to Zeiss, and so on and so forth. That will not be the case. If Huawei is able to do this, what I'm about to read you, they will own the entire stack, and they'll be the only company on earth that does, which is pretty phenomenal. The system employs laser-induced discharge plasma, LDP technology, a non-ASML alternative to laser-produced plasma, positioning China as a potential challenger to ASML's dominance in EUV lithography. Now, dominance is an understatement. ASML is the literal only player in the EUV lithography space. They are the only one. ASML had sold China $15 billion of DUV technology before the sanctions, and then after the sanctions they were unable to even service those machines, and they aren't able to sell their latest equipment into China. And the CEO of ASML, he was very upset about this, and he has said so multiple times, and because he's losing out on sales, right? And China is obviously upset because they bought $15 billion worth of equipment that ASML is not allowed to even service. So both sides are upset about that, but that's what happens in this kind of stuff with sanctions, right? You put people in tough spots, right? LDP versus LPP, a technological comparison. China's LDP-based EUV system produces 13.5 nanometer EUV light by evaporating 10 between electrodes and then ionizing it through high voltage discharge. Now, just so you know right now, the extreme DUV process that was used on the Kirin and the latest Ascend chip, 7 nanometers those chips are, that I believe was like 15x this. It was like 190 nanometers. I think this article says what it is. It's like 190 nanometers. So this would be over a 10xing for Huawei if they have this available. That's right? I mean, that is tremendous. Unlike ASML's LPP method, which depends on high-powered lasers and FPGA-driven real-time controls, LDP offers a different approach to achieving EUV light generation. Okay, key differences. LPP relies on high-power lasers to generate EUV plasma. So the higher power laser you have, obviously the smaller wavelength you have, just a common thing that we know in physics. Proven and stable for high-end semiconductor manufacturing, industry standard technology for advanced chip production, and expensive and technically demanding, okay? LDP, this is China's alternative that they're said to be developing. Uses laser electrical discharge for EUV generation. Lower cost alternative with local supply chain control. Because of the method that they're using, they're not using the actual lasers themselves, they are able to use lower lower energy lasers, which is going to save on money too. It's going to make it cheaper to make these chips. Still in development with challenges in power output and stability. This is a huge thing right here. Dr. Kim, a TSMC researcher and former Samsung IBM expert, stated on X, China is outcompeting ASML. The LDP EUV generation commercialization push is a deep-seek moment for lithography that I was fearful of. Okay, I mean, this is Dr. Kim, TSMC researcher, worked at the Samsung foundry, also worked at IBM, right? You don't get much better credentials than that when you're in a chip space. And he's saying he's fearful of this technology coming out because it's like, hey, if they have this, right? Why is he fearful? Because they will own the entire space. You know, there's just no doubt about it. LDP is much more efficient than LPP, which ASML uses. So even though we always mention that energy costs in China are much lower than the West, the simple fact is that you still want costs to be as minimal as possible, and that if China comes out with a more cost-efficient way to make chips, they're going to make it for cheaper. Other places are going to want those chips. Sanctions are not. Sanctions only prevent people so long from doing business. Tech entrepreneur, I don't think that really matters. Potential shift in the semiconductor landscape. Due to U.S. export restrictions, China has been unable to attain ASML's EUV machines. We've talked about that. I just talked about it. Forcing domestic chip makers to rely on deep ultraviolet lithography, which operates at 248 nanometers and 193 nanometers. This is the extreme DUV I've been talking about. So this is the refined version that was used on the Kirin and the latest Ascend, and it's going to be used on the Ascend 910D. A chip that's slated for later this year. And although 193 nanometer immersion lithography is the most advanced pre-EUV solution, it still requires multi-patterning to produce leading edge semiconductor nodes. Multi-patterning means that they have to lay it down one after another. I think it's like 4 times. And because of that, their yield rate is not as high. And we heard about that too. We heard that Huawei's yield rate on their chips were not, as efficient as what TSMC is putting out. But of course, right now, nobody is as efficient as TSMC. Samsung's not even close either. If China commercializes LDP-based EUV, I'm sorry, I got really bad allergies today. EUV lithography by 2025, 2026, could it bypass Western technological restrictions? Yes. Yes. The answer, possible? No. Not with what we know. They're developing a chip making facility. This is the only piece of the puzzle that's left for them. So possible? No. The answer is yes. Okay. Could it bypass it? I guess could it bypass it, right? Sorry. I guess I don't understand what they mean by bypass it. I'm thinking of it as, can they be on the same level as NVIDIA? But I don't know what's meant by bypass Western technological restrictions. I guess in a way it won't matter, because they'll have a chip as good as what NVIDIA was. So if they have this slated for 2025 with chips in production by 2026, you figure by 2027, they could be at Vera Rubin level, which is NVIDIA's next generation chip. They could be caught up by 2027. I mean, that would be absolutely incredible. Key considerations for China's EUV breakthrough: achieving technological autonomy. ASML's EUV systems rely on a global supply chain, including Cymer lasers, Zeiss optics, I discussed that, and Dutch engineering. Mass production of LDP-based EUV machines could allow China to lessen its reliance on ASML, Western semiconductor suppliers. Right now, ASML has a literal monopoly. This is a monopoly. They are the only one in the world that develops EUV systems. Overcoming power and manufacturing hurdles. LDP prototypes currently produce 50 to 100 watts, but at least 250 watts is required for commercial scale EUV lithography. Key manufacturing challenges include multi-layer mirrors, MLLs, that's how they reflect the lasers off each other, photomask and photoresist, which remain bottlenecks. China's Changsheng Institute of Optics is developing optical components, but Zeiss maintains a significant lead in precision optics. Okay, but again, China is developing these alternatives. They're going to have the supply chain up and down. Huawei and SMIC's role in adoption. SMIC, China's top foundry, is working with Huawei to incorporate LDP-based EUV scanners into its chip production process. We have heard last week now that Huawei has their own chip factory that they're making. Of course, they're not going to abandon SMIC. They're going to work with them too. But pretty soon they're going to have their own chip foundry. I mean, that is just incredible. If SMIC successfully integrates LDP-based EUV, it could close the gap with TSMC and Samsung in advanced node manufacturing. So this is what I was talking about, where they could catch up to Vera Rubin. So right now, remember that the Cloud Matrix 384 is able to outperform NVIDIA's NVL72, but only because it does it through brute force, i.e. more chips. Huawei is the master at networking, and they use advanced forms of networking to get better performance out of it, but it uses a massive amount of power. This isn't as big of a concern in China, where power costs less, but it's going to be a hard sell to the rest of the world if they want to go outside of China's borders. Okay, because NVL72 is going to be using less energy, so it'll have better performance per watt. But now if they're able to do this, right, they're going to close the gap. I mean, they'll be right there or neck and neck with NVIDIA. You know, Jensen Huang already said they're neck and neck, and this is the reason why right here. If they develop this, they will be having chips that are not a generation or two. They won't have to brute force it. They'll be competing on performance per watt basis. Okay. Market competition, geopolitical impact. If China successfully scales EUV production, it will become the only nation outside of the Netherlands to achieve EUV lithography capabilities. Only ASML has it. That's it. There's one company in the Netherlands. Initial production capacity will likely be constrained given ASML and TSMC's time to sustain their lead. That's true. Yeah, I would imagine that, you know, getting it going 2026, like I said, it'll probably be about 2027. Maybe even 2028. It's going to take a bit before they get the yields they want. The long-term roadmap, third quarter 2025 trial production would confirm China's ability to generate stable EUV power at scale. In 2026, mass production could signal China's entry into 5 nanometer semiconductor manufacturing. I think we know for sure they have this plan, though, so I do believe that the EDUV, they're actually refining that also, which they could get down to 5 nanometer. Because remember, it's not actual 5 nanometer. When they get down below 7 nanometers, it's just kind of a generational name. They're actually not going that small. So when it says like China may pursue 3 nanometer, 2 nanometer nodes, this really is just a generational talk for chips. They're actually not at 2 nanometers. We could talk about that later, but there's an excellent channel on here. There's this lady, I forget her name. I think she's Russian, and she was a chip engineer. She talks about this stuff. So anyways, by 2030, if China establishes an independent EUV supply chain and achieves 3 nanometers or 2 nanometers chip production, it could challenge ASML, TSMC, and Samsung in advanced semiconductor manufacturing. I mean, they will own the space, okay? Because unlike these other companies, they will be able to build it from the bottom up. Okay, so it's just absolutely huge. And so I want to bring into this article I saw here. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. And this isn't a toot my own horn thing, but it's just something that I've been saying repeatedly on this channel. Okay, and I just kind of want to bring it up here, where it says China is winning the chip war because of sanctions, not in spite of them. Okay. And this guy goes in here, he talks about this. He's talking about the extreme ultraviolet light with the wavelength of just 13.5 nanometers. You know, he talks about what we just read over there, how this is, you know, the Dutch company ASML holds a monopoly, right? But he's talking about how China is able to do this. So, you know, right here, let's just read this real quick. Huawei's technology, China's tech titans making waves with this latest AI chip, the Ascend 910D, set to rival NVIDIA's industry-leading H100 processor. Announced on 27 April 2025, this move marks a bold step in China's quest to break free from U.S. tech dominance, especially as Washington tightens export control on advanced chips. Meanwhile, the 910C are already in early shipment and slated for mass production next month, filling the void left by NVIDIA's restricted H20 chip, which now requires an export license. Huawei claimed the 910D could surpass the H100's performance, a feat that would disrupt NVIDIA's 88% grip on the global AI chip market, according to Wall Street Journal. Now, we talked about all this already, right? On this channel, I repeatedly said how the sanctions in China, they're calling Trump the great builder because the sanctions have woke the sleeping giant. They have poked the bear, okay? And now look at what's happening. All this stuff is happening, right? So when he's talking about this up here, the 910D, okay, is going to rival the H100. The H100 is the last generation of chips. So there'll still be a generation behind. The latest generation is the Grace Blackwell. But this is amazing that they're catching up this fast. This wasn't supposed to happen when they made these sanctions, okay? And they're talking about this right here, this move that blocked NVIDIA's H20 chip. They had to write down $5.5 billion this quarter, just this quarter. And Jensen's saying they could miss out on $50 to $60 billion Chinese market. How is NVIDIA going to be able to afford to make new chips if they're unable to get revenue from these chips, if they're prevented from selling into markets because of sanctions? It doesn't make any sense. Okay, just think about it. These chips cost a lot of money to make. You have to have money continually coming in. Okay, and so now what they're doing is they're forcing China to catch up in a way, and now they're just opening up market share to them with these export controls. It's literally backwards from what you want. I keep saying that on this channel over and over again, right? And I hope that people are getting this message of what I'm trying to say. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but let's just say it doesn't work. And then he goes on here and he talks about it. This one, what I wanted to bring up too. Okay, from the outset of the war in Ukraine, we argue that sanctions against Russia energy would backfire. More than 3 years later, Russia weathered the sanctions storm, emerging stronger than it had before, a result sharply at odds with the narrative still being peddled by Western legacy media. We know this. If you go into our media, right, every single day, China is about to fall apart. Russia's on the verge of extinction. Okay, it's going to be further from the truth. It's why a lot of times I feel like my channel doesn't show up for things, because they want to block out things like this. They don't want you to know. They don't want our companies to have to compete, which, like Jensen said, the suffering that competition creates, it drives the company to be better, drives an individual to be better, right? If you go to a gym, you got to lift, and you got to lift hard. You got to suffer a little bit so you can get stronger. But instead, the U.S. government is preventing that. They're trying to win the game by just not allowing other people to play. And that's not how you do it. That's not how it works. Okay, semiconductors are not energy commodities, of course, but attempting to corral their development through sanctions against China was destined for a similar fate. Russia has found plenty of places to ship its oil to. Now, when I say this, understand I'm not commenting on the war in Ukraine or anything like that. That's out of my space. I talk about the intersection of politics, tech, and finance. So I'm not just going to go into things like that, which I literally don't know too much about. But I do follow the sanctions things on it. I find it interesting. And from everything I've seen from other outside sources, Russia is still in existence today, which it sounded like they weren't supposed to be according to Western media. And it sounds like they have, people are buying their oil, even though technically no one's supposed to buy it. So these sanction things, they're not working. Okay, and instead of always being at odds with everybody in the world, maybe it's time we actually try to cooperate with people around the world. Stop making the world into tiers. Okay, so it was just reported that Trump is going to roll back a little bit of Biden's tiered system. Biden was going to put the world in tiers: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. What? So tier 3, of course, is like China, Iran, and Russia. And then tier 1 is like, Britain and Germany. Why are we segregating the world like that? It doesn't make sense. Work with everybody independently. Work with everybody fairly. Treat people with respect. Nations should treat other nations with respect. Work for deals that are mutually beneficial. Respect national sovereignty. Okay? These are things that every nation should do. So I do want to say all this comes with a great caveat. I haven't reported on this, and on this channel, you will hear me say, I'm not going to count this as done. I'm just not, because this is extremely difficult. And just because you lay out a roadmap does not mean that you can hit it. And yes, I know it's Huawei, and Huawei has been absolutely firing on all cylinders. But still, this seems, I'm just a little skeptical. I'm not saying they're not going to do it, but I'm just a little skeptical. That's all. Okay, so if you hear me in the future and I miss this, when you go into the comments down below, remember that I have covered this now. I knew about this. I have mentioned it a few times before too, just here and there, but I never went to depth about it. Today I went to depth, but I am going to wait and see what the next trials bring before I begin talking about it like it's done. That's all I want to say. Until they actually get to the next trials and they get successful trials, and if they can hit that 2026 production, or they're really like, yeah, we know we're going to hit 2026 production with this and with this, then I'll start talking about more like it's a done thing. But right now, I feel like it's a little bit too early. So anyways, if you like this type of content, please hit the like and subscribe button down below. especially like I said, I'm trying to bring you guys the truth. And because I'm trying to bring you the truth, that means that YouTube is going to not treat me too fairly in the algorithm. So, so make sure you hit like, share, subscribe. Have a great day.